41st President of the United States. George H.W. Bush, 1989 to 1993. January 20, 1989 to January 20, 1993. Part 4. In 2007, the Points of Light Foundation merged with the Hands-On Network to create a new organization, Points of Light. Bush appointed 2 justices to the Supreme Court of the United States. In 1990, Bush appointed a largely unknown state appellate judge, David Souter, to replace liberal icon William J. Brennan, Jr. Souter was easily confirmed and served until 2009, but joined the liberal bloc of the court, disappointing Bush. In 1991, Bush nominated conservative federal judge Clarence Thomas to succeed Thurgood Marshall, a longtime liberal stalwart. Thomas, the former head of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, faced heavy opposition in the Senate, as well as from pro-choice groups and the NAACP. His nomination faced another difficulty when Anita Hill accused Thomas of having sexually harassed her during his time as the chair of EEOC. Thomas won confirmation in a narrow 52-48 vote. 43 Republicans and 9 Democrats voted to confirm Thomas's nomination, while 46 Democrats and 2 Republicans voted against confirmation. Thomas became one of the most conservative justices of his era. Bush's education platform consisted mainly of offering federal support for a variety of innovations, such as open enrollment, incentive pay for outstanding teachers, and rewards for schools that improve performance with underprivileged children. Though Bush did not pass a major educational reform package during his presidency, his ideas influenced later reform efforts, including Goals 2000 and the No Child Left Behind Act. Bush signed the Immigration Act of 1990, which led to a 40% increase in legal immigration to the United States. The act more than doubled the number of visas given to immigrants on the basis of job skills. In the wake of the savings and loan crisis, Bush proposed a $50 billion package to rescue the savings and loans industry, and also proposed the creation of the Office of Thrift Supervision to regulate the industry. Congress passed the Financial Institutions Reform, Recovery, and Enforcement Act of 1989, which incorporated most of Bush's proposals. Bush was widely seen as a pragmatic caretaker president who lacked a unified and compelling long-term theme in his efforts. A Bush soundbite, referring to the issue of overarching purpose as the vision thing, has become a metonym applied to other political figures accused of similar difficulties. His ability to gain broad international support for the Gulf War and the war's result were seen as both a diplomatic and military triumph, rousing bipartisan approval, though his decision to withdraw without removing Saddam Hussein left mixed feelings, and attention returned to the domestic front and a souring economy. A New York Times article mistakenly depicted Bush as being surprised to see a supermarket barcode reader. The report of his reaction exacerbated the notion that he was out of touch. Bush was popular throughout most of his presidency. After the Gulf War concluded in February 1991, his approval rating saw a high of 89%, before gradually declining for the rest of the year, and eventually falling below 50% according to a January 1992 Gallup poll. His sudden drop in his favorability was likely due to the early 1990s recession, which shifted his image from conquering hero to politician befuddled by economic matters. At the elite level, several commentators and political experts lamented the state of American politics in 1991-1992 and reported the voters were angry. Many analysts blamed the poor quality of national election campaigns. Bush announced his re-election bid in early 1992. With a coalition victory in the Persian Gulf War and high approval ratings, Bush's re-election initially looked likely. As a result, many leading Democrats, including Mario Cuomo, Dick Gephardt, and Al Gore, declined to seek their party's presidential nomination. However, Bush's tax increase angered many conservatives who believed that Bush had strayed from the conservative principles of Ronald Reagan. He faced a challenge from conservative political columnist Pat Buchanan in the 1992 Republican primaries. Bush fended off Buchanan's challenge and won his party's nomination at the 1992 Republican National Convention. Still, the convention adopted a socially conservative platform strongly influenced by the Christian right. Meanwhile, the Democrats nominated Governor Bill Clinton of Arkansas. A moderate who was affiliated with the Democratic Leadership Council, DLC, Clinton favored welfare reform, deficit reduction, and a tax cut for the middle class. In early 1992, the race took an unexpected twist when Texas billionaire H. Ross Perot launched a third-party bid, claiming that neither Republicans nor Democrats could eliminate the deficit and make government more efficient. His message appealed to voters across the political spectrum disappointed with both parties' perceived fiscal irresponsibility. Perot also attacked NAFTA, which he claimed would lead to major job losses. National polling taken in mid-1992 showed Perot in the lead, but Clinton experienced a surge through effective campaigning and the selection of Senator Al Gore, a popular and relatively young Southerner, as his running mate. Clinton won the election, taking 43% of the popular vote and 370 electoral votes, while Bush won 37.5% of the popular vote and 168 electoral votes. Perot won 19% of the popular vote, one of the highest totals for a third-party candidate in U.S. history, drawing equally from both major candidates, according to exit polls. Clinton performed well in the Northeast, the Midwest, and the West Coast, while also waging the strongest Democratic campaign in the South since the 1976 election. Several factors were important in Bush's defeat. The ailing economy which arose from recession may have been the main factor in Bush's loss, as 7 in 10 voters said on Election Day that the economy was either not so good or poor. On the eve of the 1992 election, the unemployment rate stood at 7.8%, which was the highest it had been since 1984. The president was also damaged by his alienation of many conservatives in his party. Bush partially blamed Perot for his defeat, though exit polls showed that Perot drew his voters about equally from Clinton and Bush. Despite his defeat, Bush left office with a 56% job approval rating in January 1993. Like many of his predecessors, Bush issued a series of pardons during his last days in office. In December 1992, he granted executive clemency to 6 former senior government officials implicated in the Iran-Contra scandal, most prominently former Secretary of Defense Caspar Weinberger. The charges against the 6 were that they lied to or withheld information from Congress. The pardons effectively brought an end to the Iran-Contra scandal. According to Seymour Martin Lipset, the 1992 election had several unique characteristics. Voters felt that economic conditions were worse than they were, which harmed Bush. A rare event was the presence of a strong third-party candidate. Liberals launched a backlash against 12 years of a conservative White House. The chief factor was Clinton uniting his party and winning over several heterogeneous groups. After leaving office, Bush and his wife built a retirement house in the community of West Oaks, Houston. He established a presidential office within the Park Laureate Building on Memorial Drive in Houston. He also frequently spent time at his vacation home in Kennebunkport, took annual cruises in Greece, went on fishing trips in Florida, and visited the Bohemian Club in Northern California. He declined to serve on corporate boards but delivered numerous paid speeches and was an advisor to the Carlyle Group, a private equity firm. He never published his memoirs, but he and Brent Scowcroft co-wrote A World Transformed, a 1998 work on foreign policy. Portions of his letters and his diary were later published as The China Diary of George H.W. Bush and All the Best, George Bush. During a 1993 visit to Kuwait, Bush was targeted in an assassination plot directed by the Iraqi intelligence service. President Clinton retaliated when he ordered the firing of 23 cruise missiles at Iraqi intelligence service headquarters in Baghdad. Bush did not publicly comment on the assassination attempt or the missile strike, but privately spoke with Clinton shortly before the strike took place. In the 1994 gubernatorial elections, his sons George W. and Jeb concurrently ran for governor of Texas and governor of Florida. Concerning their political careers, he advised them both that at some point both of you may want to say, "Well, I don't agree with my dad on that point," or, "Frankly, I think Dad was wrong on that." Do it. Chart your own course, not just on the issues but on defining yourselves. George W. won his race against Ann Richards while Jeb lost to Lawton Chiles. After the results came in, the elder Bush told ABC, "I have very mixed emotions. Proud father, is the way I would sum it all up." Jeb would again run for governor of Florida in 1998 and win at the same time that his brother George W. won re-election in Texas. It marked the second time in United States history that a pair of brothers served simultaneously as governors. Bush supported his son's candidacy in the 2000 presidential election but did not actively campaign in the election and did not deliver a speech at the 2000 Republican National Convention. George W. Bush defeated Al Gore in the 2000 election and was re-elected in 2004. Bush and his son thus became the second father-son pair to each serve as President of the United States, following John Adams and John Quincy Adams. Through previous administrations, the elder Bush had ubiquitously been known as George Bush or President Bush, but following his son's election, the need to distinguish between them has made retronymic forms such as George H.W. Bush and George Bush Sr. and colloquialisms such as Bush 41 and Bush the Elder more common. Bush advised his son on some personnel choices, approving of the selection of Dick Cheney as running mate and the retention of George Tenet as CIA director. However, he was not consulted on all appointments, including that of his old rival, Donald Rumsfeld, as Secretary of Defense. Though he avoided giving unsolicited advice to his son, Bush and his son also discussed some policy matters, especially regarding national security issues. In his retirement, Bush used the public spotlight to support various charities. Despite earlier political differences with Bill Clinton, the two former presidents eventually became friends. They appeared together in television ads, encouraging aid for victims of the 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake and tsunami and Hurricane Katrina. However, when interviewed by John Meacham, Bush criticized Donald Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney, and even his son George W. Bush for their handling of foreign policy after the September 11 attacks. Bush supported Republican John McCain in the 2008 presidential election and Republican Mitt Romney in the 2012 presidential election, but both were defeated by Democrat Barack Obama. In 2011, Obama awarded Bush with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in the United States. Bush supported his son Jeb's bid in the 2016 Republican primaries. Jeb Bush's campaign struggled, however, and he withdrew from the race during the primaries. Neither George H.W. nor George W. Bush endorsed the eventual Republican nominee, Donald Trump. All three Bushes emerged as frequent critics of Trump's policies and speaking style, while Trump frequently criticized George W. Bush's presidency. George H.W. later said he voted for the Democratic nominee, Hillary Clinton, in the general election. After the election, Bush wrote a letter to President-elect Donald Trump in January 2017 to inform him that because of his poor health, he would not be able to attend Trump's inauguration on January 20. He gave him his best wishes. In August 2017, after the violence at Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, both Presidents Bush released a joint statement saying, "America must always reject racial bigotry, anti-Semitism, and hatred in all forms." As we pray for Charlottesville, we are all reminded of the fundamental truths recorded by that city's most prominent citizen in the Declaration of Independence. We are all created equal and endowed by our Creator with unalienable rights. On April 17, 2018, Barbara Bush died at the age of 92 at her home in Houston, Texas. Her funeral was held at St. Martin's Episcopal Church in Houston 4 days later. Bush, along with former Presidents Barack Obama, George W. Bush's son, Bill Clinton, and First Ladies Melania Trump, Michelle Obama, Laura Bush daughter-in-law, and Hillary Clinton attended the funeral and posed together for a photo as a sign of unity. On November 1, 2018, Bush went to the polls to vote early in the midterm elections. This would be his final public appearance. After a long battle with vascular Parkinson's disease, Bush died at his home in Houston on November 30, 2018, at the age of 94. At the time of his death, he was the longest-lived U.S. president until March 22, 2019, when Jimmy Carter surpassed his lifespan. He was also the third oldest vice president. Bush lay in state in the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol from December 3 through December 5. He was the 12th U.S. president to be accorded this honor. Then, on December 5, Bush's casket was transferred from the Capitol Rotunda to Washington National Cathedral, where a state funeral was held. After the funeral, Bush's body was transported to George H.W. Bush Presidential Library in College Station, Texas, where he was buried next to his wife Barbara and daughter Robin. At the funeral, former President George W. Bush eulogized his father, saying, "He looked for the good in each person, and he usually found it." In May 1991, the New York Times revealed that Bush had developed Graves' disease, a non-contagious thyroid condition that his wife Barbara also had. Bush had 2 separate hip replacement surgeries in 2000 and 2007. Thereafter, Bush started to experience weakness in his legs, which was attributed to vascular Parkinsonism, a form of Parkinson's disease. He progressively developed problems walking, initially needing a walking stick for mobility aid before he eventually came to rely on a wheelchair from 2011 onwards. Bush was a lifelong Episcopalian and a member of St. Martin's Episcopal Church in Houston. As president, Bush regularly attended services at St. John's Episcopal Church in Washington, D.C. He cited various moments in his life on the deepening of his faith, including his escape from Japanese forces in 1944 and the death of his 3-year-old daughter Robin in 1953. His faith was reflected in his 1,000 Points of Light speech, his support for prayer in schools, and his support for the pro-life movement following his election as vice president. Shortly after his death, it was revealed that Bush secretly financed the education and food expenses of a schoolboy from the Philippines under the assumed name George Walker through the charity Compassion International. Polls of historians and political scientists have ranked Bush in the top half of presidents. A 2018 poll of the American Political Science Association's Presidents and Executive Politics section ranked Bush as the 17th best president out of 44. A 2017 C-SPAN poll of historians also ranked Bush as the 20th best president out of 43. Richard Rose described Bush as a guardian president, and many other historians and political scientists have similarly described Bush as a passive, hands-off president who was largely content with things as they were. Professor Stephen Knott writes that, generally the Bush presidency is viewed as successful in foreign affairs but a disappointment in domestic affairs. Biographer John Meacham writes that, after he left office, many Americans viewed Bush as a gracious and underappreciated man who had many virtues but who had failed to project enough of a distinctive identity and vision to overcome the economic challenges of 1991-92 and to win a second term. Bush himself noted that his legacy was lost between the glory of Reagan and the trials and tribulations of my sons. In the 2010s, Bush was fondly remembered for his willingness to compromise, which contrasted with the intensely partisan era that followed his presidency. In 2018, Vox highlighted Bush for his pragmatism as a moderate Republican president by working across the aisle. They specifically noted Bush's accomplishments within the domestic policy by making bipartisan deals, including raising the tax budget among the wealthy with the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act of 1990. I stop at this point today. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep exploring the world's incredible stories. If you have any comments, I hope you contribute by writing, in order to develop the channel. Soon we will publish Part 5. Thank you for watching.